Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Background information: we live in an old and large manor that has been split into 3 attached houses. The houses are about 170 years old and were built around 5 huge giant sequoias, which were about 220 years old. In the UK, giant sequoias are very rare, and the 2 in our garden increased the house price by about £75,000. We lived next to 2 really nice neighbors, one young couple and one elderly couple. The story? Unfortunately, our elderly neighbors passed away, so their daughter and her family moved in. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah was instantly a pain to deal with. We had been sharing chickens with the previous neighbors, and Sarah agreed to keep sharing them. However, on her nights, she would constantly forget to put them away. "I'll check on them later," she'd always say, but never did. We ended up having to check them every night anyway. One night, her kids thought it would be funny to mess with our animals. "Let's see what happens if we open this," I heard one of them whisper. They opened our personal duck pen in the night, which led to a mass slaughter. Later, the chickens met the same fate. "Oh, kids will be kids," Sarah said when we confronted her. "I'm sure they didn't mean any harm." About 2 years ago, there was a storm, and one of her sequoias somehow fell over and died. They were distraught, understandably, but from then on, the jealousy started. She would constantly complain about our trees. "You're so lucky to have those sequoias," she'd say, before adding, "though they're making too much shade in our garden." It wasn't true, but that was just Sarah being Sarah. There were a few dry threats. "Maybe we should just chop it down," she'd mutter while glaring at our tree. "Or perhaps the next storm will take care of it," her husband would add. Until we came back from a holiday to Portugal to find a huge 6-meter stump and nothing else. I mean, how do you get rid of a 100-foot tree in just 2 weeks? 2 of our old British oak trees had been crushed as well. My mom and sisters were crying, my dad was red in the face, and we had no evidence Sarah had done it. "There was a terrible storm," she claimed innocently. "We had to get rid of it for safety reasons." We then received an £8,000 bill for damages to her property and to have the tree chopped up and removed. The wood alone would have been worth a small fortune. We had lost all hope, and 2 weeks had passed when my dad came running in from the garden waving his phone. "You won't believe what I found!" he shouted. We had put up a wildlife camera a few months ago and had caught everything. We got a lawyer on the phone and started our revenge. The tree surgeon we consulted was shocked. "This was an original specimen brought into the UK in 1850, he explained, along with the 2 that were in Elveston Castle Country Park. There were 218 around the UK, but only 60 now. He also advised us to call an engineer because the roots might be in the foundation, and when they rot, it could damage the house. Turns out we would need to redo the foundations. When we took Sarah to court, her face went white when we showed the video evidence. We sued them for damage to property, trespassing, and lots of other smaller claims. The tree would cost £300,000 to replace with another 200-year-old sequoia, practically impossible, plus the damage to the foundation, which was £250,000, and the 2 oaks, which were another £30,000. So with the smaller claims, it went to about £600,000. They had to move out. "I guess karma really does come back around," my dad said as we watched them leave. "We've now paid off the mortgage, done a lovely loft and kitchen conversion, and have basically redone the house and garden. We've planted a 70-year-old sequoia tree in the back garden. We also had our kitchen counter and table made from the old sequoia wood. Our new neighbors are fantastic, a family with whom we share chickens, ducks, and pygmy goats. This is how neighbors should be," my mom often says. I make good money babysitting their kids too. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be writing one of these stories, but here we are. This happened over the past year and recently reached its conclusion. I own a beautiful 5-acre property that's been in my family for 3 generations. The centerpiece is a 2-acre spring-fed pond that my grandfather dug out himself back in the 1960s. Our home sits on a small hill overlooking the pond, and it's absolutely gorgeous. About 2 years ago, a developer bought the farmland adjacent to our property and started building an upscale subdivision. I wasn't thrilled, but I understood that's just how things go these days. The houses they built were nice enough. Cookie-cutter McMansions starting at $500,000. As construction wrapped up and people started moving in, I started getting letters from their newly formed homeowners association inviting me to join. The letters started friendly enough: "Join our wonderful community, be part of something special," but I had zero interest. My property predated their development by decades, and I had no desire to have anyone tell me what color I could paint my house or how tall my grass could grow. I politely declined each invitation. That's when things started getting weird. I began noticing people from the subdivision walking around my pond, setting up lawn chairs and even fishing. When I'd confront them, they'd say things like, "Oh, this is the community pond, right?" Or, "The homeowners association president said this was a neighborhood amenity. I put up private property and no trespassing signs, but they kept getting torn down. I installed security cameras and caught several instances of people deliberately removing them." When I confronted the homeowners association president, Karen, yes, that's actually her name, she gave me the most condescending smile I've ever seen. "Actually," she said, looking down her nose at me through her designer glasses, "according to our subdivision plans, this pond is designated as a community feature. You really should join the homeowners association. It would make things so much easier." I was floored. This pond has been private property since my grandfather dug it in 1964. "It's on my deed. What are you talking about?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, times change. The developer included it in our plans, and the Homeowners Association Board has voted to designate it as a community amenity. You can either join the Homeowners Association and have access like everyone else, or we'll have to take legal action." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Show me these plans," I demanded. She produced a fancy-looking map of the subdivision that showed my pond labeled as Community Pond and Recreation Area. I noticed immediately that the map had been altered. Someone had clearly photoshopped over the original planning documents. I pulled out my phone and showed her my property deed and the original survey from when my grandfather had the pond dug. "This is my property, period. Keep your residents off my land or I'll start pressing charges for trespassing." That's when she dropped the bomb. "We've already filed paperwork with the county claiming adverse possession. Since the pond has been used by the community without restriction, it legally belongs to all of us now. You'll be receiving official notice soon." I immediately called my lawyer. Thankfully, my cousin Mark specializes in real estate law. He was as outraged as I was and agreed to help me pro bono. Though I insisted on paying him anyway, family or not, this was going to be a lot of work. The next few weeks were insane. The Homeowners Association put up their own signs declaring the pond a community recreation area, and even tried to install a dock. I had to call the police multiple times to remove trespassers. Some of the residents would scream at me that I was being selfish and ruining their property values by not sharing. Mark discovered that the developer had actually included my pond in their marketing materials, promising potential buyers access to a scenic lake with fishing and recreation opportunities. He'd never bothered to verify that he had any right to make these promises. The Homeowners Association filed their adverse possession claim, which was laughable since the subdivision wasn't even a year old. Adverse possession requires continuous use for many years in our state. But they also tried to claim that since the developer had promised the pond as an amenity, they had some sort of implied easement. Mark filed a countersuit for fraud against both the Homeowners Association and the developer. He also helped me file for a temporary restraining order to keep people off my property while the case was pending. The judge granted it immediately. You should have seen Karen's face when she was served with both the restraining order and our lawsuit. She tried to argue with the process server. "This is ridiculous. We're a registered homeowners association. We have rights." The developer threw the homeowners association under the bus almost immediately. Their lawyer contacted us within days of receiving our lawsuit, admitting that they had no right to include my pond in their marketing and offering to settle. They agreed to pay for new, permanent security fencing around my property, cover my legal fees, and issue a formal retraction to all homeowners admitting they had misrepresented the pond's status. But the homeowners association wasn't done yet. They called an emergency meeting and voted to impose a special assessment on all members to fund their legal defense. Several homeowners contacted me afterward, furious about being forced to pay for Karen's vendetta. That's when things got really interesting. One of the homeowners, Dave, turned out to be a forensic accountant. He started looking into the Homeowners Association's finances and discovered some concerning irregularities. Karen and several board members had been using Homeowners Association funds for personal expenses, including a business lunch at a high-end steakhouse that cost over $800. They'd also hired Karen's brother's landscaping company at triple the market rate for maintenance services. Dave shared all this information with me and other homeowners. He also found evidence that Karen had personally paid the graphic designer who altered the subdivision plans to include my pond. This was straight-up fraud. A group of homeowners called for an emergency meeting to remove the board. Karen tried to cancel it, claiming it wasn't properly noticed, but the Homeowners Association bylaws were clear. If enough members demanded a meeting, it had to happen. The meeting was absolute chaos. It was held in someone's oversized garage because the community center wasn't built yet. Over 100 people showed up, which was apparently a record turnout. Karen tried to maintain control, but homeowners were furious about both the special assessment and the financial mismanagement. One homeowner, an elderly gentleman named Frank, stood up and said, "I bought here because they promised us a pond, but they lied to us, and now they want us to pay thousands in legal fees to steal someone's private property. This is shameful." Another homeowner, Sarah, added, "My kids were so excited about fishing in that pond, but I've taught them that taking things that don't belong to them is wrong. What kind of example are we setting here?" The meeting ended with the entire board being voted out. Dave was elected as the new president, along with a completely new board. Their first official act was to withdraw the adverse possession claim and issue a formal apology to me. But we weren't done yet. Mark advised me to press forward with our fraud case, not just against the developer, who had already settled, but against Karen and the former board members personally. The evidence from Dave's financial audit made our case even stronger. During discovery, we found emails between Karen and the developer from before the subdivision was even built. She'd known all along that the pond was private property, but had conspired with the developer to market it as a community feature. Their plan was to pressure me into joining the homeowners association by creating conflict with the new residents. The court proceedings were surprisingly quick. The judge was not amused by their schemes. He granted summary judgment in our favor, ordering Karen and the former board members to personally repay all the homeowners association funds they'd misused, plus damages. They also had to pay my legal fees and the cost of the security fencing, since the developer's settlement had been contingent on the homeowners association dropping their claims. The new Homeowners Association Board, led by Dave, has been fantastic. They've implemented strict financial controls and transparency measures. They even helped pay for some beautiful landscaping along the new security fence to make it look more attractive. As for Karen, she put her house up for sale 2 months ago. Turns out she couldn't afford the judgment against her and the shame of facing her neighbors. Last I heard, she moved in with her brother. You know, the one with the overpriced landscaping company. The pond is peaceful again. I've actually become good friends with several of the subdivision residents, including Dave and his family. I occasionally invite them over for properly authorized fishing, with catch and release only, my grandfather's rule. It's nice to share on my own terms without being forced. The developer had to send letters to all homeowners acknowledging that the pond was never part of the subdivision and offering partial refunds to anyone who could prove they bought specifically because of the promised pond access. They also had to revise all their marketing materials and pay for new subdivision signs that don't mention the pond. Update. 6 months later. The situation has actually improved beyond my expectations. Dave and the new Homeowners Association Board have done an amazing job turning things around. They used the money recovered from Karen and the old board to build a really nice community park with a playground and pavilion. It's become a great gathering spot for the neighborhood. Karen tried to appeal the judgment against her, but the appeals court upheld it unanimously. She's now required to make monthly payments to cover the damages and legal fees. Her brother's landscaping company went out of business after losing the Homeowners Association contract and several others when the truth about their pricing came out. The developer learned their lesson too. They're building another subdivision nearby, and their marketing materials now include a prominent disclaimer about amenities being subject to verification of ownership and access rights. The best part? The whole experience has actually brought the community together. Instead of fighting over my pond, the neighborhood has regular events at their new park. They even invited me to their summer barbecue as a special guest. Dave joked that I should be their honorary non-homeowners association neighbor of the year. My property values have actually increased because the subdivision is now known for good management and strong community spirit rather than homeowners association drama. Sometimes the best endings come from standing your ground and letting justice take its course. The security fence has become a neighborhood art project. With my permission, local kids have planted flowering vines along it, and it looks beautiful in spring. I've even started a yearly tradition of hosting a properly permitted fishing derby for the neighborhood kids, teaching them about responsible wildlife management and respect for private property. It just goes to show that doing things the right way, even when it's harder, usually works out better in the end. Final update. 1 year later. I wanted to give everyone a final update on the Homeowners Association pond situation because some interesting developments have happened in the past 6 months that really brought this whole saga to a satisfying conclusion. First off, Karen's legal troubles got even worse. The state attorney's office picked up our case after discovering this wasn't her first Homeowners Association fraud rodeo. Turns out she'd pulled similar schemes in 2 other communities in neighboring counties. They found a pattern of her moving into new developments, getting elected to homeowners association boards, and then using her position to embezzle funds and manipulate property disputes. The prosecutor contacted me and asked if I'd testify about our case. I agreed immediately. During the investigation, they uncovered that Karen had actually approached the developer before buying her house, suggesting she could help manage the transition and handle the problematic neighbor with the pond. She'd planned this whole thing from the start. In March, Karen pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. She got 18 months in jail plus 5 years of probation. She also has to pay restitution to all 3 homeowners associations she defrauded. The judge was particularly harsh because she'd targeted new communities where people were just trying to build their homes and lives. The developer faced consequences too. The State Real Estate Commission investigated them and found multiple violations in how they marketed properties. They had to pay substantial fines and agree to strict oversight of their future developments. They also had to offer refunds to every homeowner in the subdivision, not just the ones who could prove they bought because of the pond. Dave, our hero accountant and new homeowners association president, helped negotiate an amazing settlement for the community. The developer had to pay for the new community park and pavilion I mentioned before, plus establish a reserve fund for future maintenance. They also had to build a real community pool, something they'd originally promised but never delivered. Remember Karen's brother with the overpriced landscaping contract? He tried to sue the homeowners association for breaking his contract, but that backfired spectacularly. During discovery, they found fake invoices and kickbacks to Karen. He ended up getting charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. He took a plea deal and got probation, but his company is permanently banned from government and homeowners association contracts. The whole experience has actually led to some positive changes in state law. Dave and several other homeowners worked with our state representatives to pass new legislation requiring more transparency in homeowners association operations and stricter penalties for homeowners association fraud. They're calling it the Community Protection Act, though some people jokingly call it Karen's Law. As for my pond, it's more beautiful than ever. The security fence worked so well that local wildlife has really flourished. We've got a family of otters now, and the bird watching is incredible. I've started working with a local conservation group to document the ecosystem. The relationship with the subdivision has completely transformed. Instead of trying to steal my pond, they've embraced having their own amazing community amenities. The new park and pool are always busy with families and community events. They even started a gardening club that maintains beautiful landscaping throughout the neighborhood. I've developed a great friendship with many neighbors, especially Dave and his family. His kids love learning about pond maintenance and wildlife from me. I've taught them how to fish responsibly, just like my grandfather taught me. It's become a wonderful way to pass on his legacy. Last month, something really special happened. The Homeowners Association held a community celebration for the opening of their new pool. During the ceremony, Dave presented me with a plaque thanking me for standing strong against fraud and helping build a better community. He also announced they're naming their new park Heritage Park in honor of my family's history in the area. The best part, 3 other nearby developments have contacted Dave for advice on preventing homeowners association fraud and building better communities. He's become a local expert on homeowners association governance, and the changes he's implemented are being used as a model for other neighborhoods. My cousin Mark, the lawyer who helped me fight this battle, has gotten several new clients facing similar homeowners association issues. He's become known as the go-to attorney for homeowners fighting corrupt homeowners associations. He says our case helped establish important legal precedents about homeowners association overreach and fraud. Karen's house finally sold at a significant loss. The new owners are a lovely retired couple who've already become active in community events. They actually came over to apologize for what their predecessor put me through, even though they had nothing to do with it. They've become regular guests at my catch-and-release fishing events. The property values in the subdivision have increased substantially, not because of any stolen pond access, but because the community is now known for its strong governance, beautiful amenities, and friendly atmosphere. Several real estate agents have told me they have waiting lists of people wanting to buy in the neighborhood. I've had numerous opportunities to sell my property to developers offering ridiculous amounts of money, but I always decline. This land, and especially this pond, is my family's legacy. Standing up to Karen and her corrupt homeowners association wasn't just about protecting my property rights, it was about honoring my grandfather's hard work and preserving something special for future generations. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It would have been easier to give in to the pressure or sell out, but fighting the good fight led to positive changes that benefit the whole community. My grandfather always said that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. This experience proved him right once again. The pond remains private, but now it's surrounded by good neighbors who respect boundaries and property rights. We've found that when people treat each other with respect and honesty, everyone wins. Well, except Karen. She's still in jail, which is exactly where she belongs. The next one is a malicious compliances story. This one is from my early days when I was working as a technician for an internet provider company, but it still brings a smile to my face when I remember it, and recently had a technician coming to install my internet and it all came back. I was working mostly residential buildings, and my job that time was pretty simple. Come to the basement, find our distribution box, patch the cable to the right endpoint for the requesting flat, go to the flat, fix cable outlet when needed, verify cable is live. There is signal coming through, and it is the right signal. This is somewhat important. Connect modem, verify all good, tell the happy customer the internet is ready to use, and off I go. One day I'm doing my job again, but got this know-it-all guy. Had to call him to let me in the building, and it was a blast right from the start. First, he told me he knew exactly where my company distribution box is, only to lead me to the electricity provider box. Then, he is absolutely sure his flat is number XX, while the papers state YY, and indeed was YY. There were a few more helps from his side, which I skipped to avoid this becoming a book, but eventually we are up in the flat, and I am going to check the signal, but the guy is like, "Come on, hurry up, need my connection, need to work on super important stuff." I tell him I need to test the signal first, but here he opens up my malicious compliance window. He says, "You do not need to do that, just connect the cable. If the cable is live, just go and I will finish it myself." I still give him a chance by explicitly stressing that test will take some minutes only, but if it does not work, I will not be able to come earlier than in a couple of days. No, absolutely not. He can finish it by himself. Okay, my man, you've got it. Already too long story. To make it short, cable was live, but the signal was from local TV antennae, not from our cable internet. This was actually relatively common issue at that time. Older residential buildings reused wiring, cable patching to a wrong one, and was not so hard to fix once you knew what's wrong. I only imagine what the guy tried to make it work before calling our call center to schedule my visit again. What I know is, I came to the flat 3 days later only to be greeted by his lovely wife, which made me some tea and thanked me for being kind and fixing the problem. To come to a closure, when a technician came to install my internet a few days ago, I made him some tea and told him to take his time and do all that's needed. We had a little chat, and guess what? The process and issues are still the same, and recently he was telling his junior colleague why checking if cable is live is not enough. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.